We are talking about a very important topic today, which is practicing the Ifa tradition in a prison environment. So, guys, if you do have any questions as we go along, I do ask you all to stay on topic because I want to get through it and honor the people who came for this particular topic. If you have questions about other things not related to the topic, feel free to like DM me those types of questions, or you can even email me support at asanee44.com, and we will probably cover those in a different live stream session, depending on the nature of the questions that I get from you all. If you're watching the replay, let me know what stood out to you. If you have any additional comments or concerns about what's going on as far as this topic goes, or in the comments, you can actually ask questions about different topics as well. But, keep us informed. Let us know what is going on. Quick disclaimer, because we are talking about sensitive subject matter here, the realities of somebody trying to practice the tradition in a prison environment. So many different restrictions and barriers can apply to their situation. So, if this topic is a little bit difficult for you, or, if your loved one is incarcerated, take your time as we go through the live stream. If you need to pause or break, feel free to do so. Okay. Also note, guys, that the information provided herein is for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for any type of legal advice, guidance, facility specific guidance, or anything like that. Let's see, guys. Greetings to you. Thank you dearly for showing up for this episode of Saju. And I want to go ahead and give a shout out to you right now. I want to thank Asaju because he was very helpful with the planning and the information in this particular live stream, because he has a lot of knowledge about this particular subject matter. So he was able to assist me tremendously. So I thank you dearly for your help as always. So going back to the episode, I do want to cover like some of the pre-episode questions that I presented on YouTube, which, well, it's only one, which is, what are the challenges that you or your loved ones have faced trying to practice IFA while incarcerated? 25% of you all said that your loved ones struggled due to a lack of access to books, study materials needed for consistent IFA practice, which makes sense because that is a very common issue. No one reported having issues with the chaplain or administrative staff at the prison. So that is really good and odd, but it is probably because I would imagine most people who were answering that were not actually incarcerated themselves. Maybe it was a family member or something like that, because that can be the major challenge in a lot of prison environments. 50% of you all indicated that having no community, no clergy, which would be a Babalawo or an Ifa, or being isolated in your practice is the most difficulty. And that is definitely what I expected to be like the number one challenge here, because that's a challenge for even people in the free world, because IFA is not well regarded, unfortunately, in so many different environments. 25% of you all shared that your biggest challenge was not knowing how to support your an inmate's IFA journey. And we are going to get to that in this episode, as well as some of the other challenges that you all face or have faced, or family members, etc., have faced with dealing with the tradition within an incarceration setting. That being said, there is no perfect resolution here because it is a very, very nuanced topic. EFI is nuanced in and of itself, and is even much more so nuanced when you're trying to practice in a restricted environment like prison, or even so another country, right? I need to do an episode on that as well, because that could be really, really tricky. All right. So Greetings. Is it Lucky Guru? I don't know how to pronounce it, but greetings. Okay. Rugeria, you're saying as a juvenile in Philadelphia, I was forbidden to practice my beliefs or have access to a Babalawo. Yeah, Muslims and Christians were allowed to access. Absolutely, we're going to talk about that because unfortunately, that is a major reality. A lot of that stems from what I said before, because the practice is not widely known, and even so, in a lot of the prison environments, it is still very much so considered witchcraft. Because you have to remember that the chaplains that oversee prison facilities are 9 times out of 10 going to be Christian, adherents, even so not Muslims in a lot of cases. However, the Muslims have a very well established practice in the prison system throughout the U.S. So we don't have that same level of support and organization, and that definitely needs to change. You have youth behind the wall today don't have access outside regular mail or phone calls. PA is something else. Absolutely. Philadelphia, meaning, and that's another major caveat is the state, even so down to the county and things like that. We're talking about prison today, though, because hey, it's nuanced in and of itself, and there's so much more nuance that takes place when we're talking about the county system. What else is it? County. I know it's the federal system. County. There are other tiers, so forgive me if I'm not saying it all because I can't remember the other ones. So yes. So let's see. Alafia, Hidden Beauty, great to see you. Alrighty, so sorry, I was going through some messages. I don't know what's going on with these messages. County, state, and federal. Thank you for that. It wouldn't come out for some reason. It seems like there's another tier. Is county separated from city? That's what I don't know why it wasn't coming to me, but I knew it. It just wasn't coming to my brain at that particular moment. But yes, it's a very tiered system, and even within federal systems, because they don't operate in just one space, there are so many challenges even within those dynamics as well. You said you've heard, though, in the feds, they have allowed the practices of IFA and leukemia. Yes, in certain instances, but again, restrictions based on where you are, the facility, what the chaplain says is okay or not, because that's really the local decision-making authority there, though there are specific laws in place for people who do want to practice. Unfortunately, it doesn't go all the way up to the higher tier. And like with most other things in prison, inmates don't have the same level of rights and things like that. Even though the law may provide for certain rights, they're not always guaranteed, as you will know. That's just the reality that we're faced with. So we're going to jump into some of the things that I have to talk about. Some of your questions. You guys asked a lot of questions that I really wasn't expecting that when it came to this particular episode, but I did get quite a few questions, and I thank you for them because it really led the whole, process, and it opened up my eyes a lot just doing the research for this episode. So, of course, first question, can inmates freely practice IFA in prison? Technically, yes, but obviously they cannot practice the full scope of IFA. So prison policies vary widely depending on whether a person is federal, state, county, custody. I had it here. I couldn't remember. I don't know why. But yes, it depends on where you are. Federal prisons do follow a single national standard, but it can vary still state by state, depending on each facility, who's overseeing that facility. Even especially when we're talking about religious practices, it comes down to the chaplain, as I said before, who really sets the standard in the case of religion and things related specifically to IFA practice. Okay. What IFA practitioners are allowed to do or access will depend on the specific institution. Absolutely. That's what I was saying before. It just really depends on what's going on, how well aware the people are that oversee the process, how open-minded they are. That has a lot to do with it, right? So we have to understand that we are talking about the incarceration system, and so there is just an inherent limit of freedoms when it comes to inmates, because they're not in the free world, so they're not going to have the same liberties that we are supposed to have in the free world, right? All facilities, however, are mandated to operate under federal law under the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. That is the law that regulates this. So for anybody who is really dealing with the system, I encourage you to research that at a high degree, especially family and friends, to understand the rights that inmates do have in order to try your best to advocate for them in this regard. Okay. Still, there are so many different security restrictions, and these are applicable to everybody within the system, regardless of what you practice. IFA is going to be under a much higher level of scrutiny just because of the nuances of our practice, what we do, the ritual works, things like that. Like you're talking about systems like Christianity and Islam, as you mentioned earlier. Those systems, really all you need is like a Bible or a Quran to practice, right? Even like the crosses and things like that. It's not like you a must have in Christianity. Is really just decoration, idolatry, according to the Bible, but that's a whole nother story. Islam, some people in Islam do, it is part of the tradition to still do sacrifices, but it's not at the same level and in the same way that we do them in the Ifa tradition. And they don't have to be there. I mean, you don't have to be there to get elbow or something like that performed on your behalf in Ifa, like the regular rituals, but certain things you do have to be present for, like initiation, of course, which is a whole nother deal that is just not even available to inmates if they desire to do that because of the nature of the process itself, right? I do want to emphasize that I'm focusing in on the prison system. I think I said it before, the federal level prison system. I'm not talking about the other layers. What documentation does a facility require to verify an inmate's affiliation or allow them to practice? So usually you don't have to have any documentation unless you are requesting something special. You need some type of special accommodations, which would usually look like maybe trying to get your babalawo or ianifa in order to do Ifa divination or provide like in-person counseling. And we're going to get deeper into that aspect later. That being said, it's not something easy to do, right? Again, the nature of our practice presents a whole lot of limitations when it comes to the criminal justice system and how it is ran, right? So are inmates required to prove that they practice before they're incarcerated? Can they transition into IFA after incarceration? So you are not required to prove that you practice any tradition, any religion, spiritual practice, whatever it may be, before you go in order for you to continue to hold your belief system. You just show that you hold a sincerely held belief. That's sufficient in most cases, again, except for when you are requiring special accommodations, then you might have to justify certain things. And you know there are so many caveats that apply in those situations. Is IFA formally recognized in the prison's chaplaincy handbook, or must inmates register under a broader category? It varies, but in most cases, it's not there. Is it may be listed under you would probably have to qualify, I should say, under traditional religion or other category if traditional religions are not present. Probably doesn't even go down in most cases to like African traditional religions. It would just be traditional or indigenous religious practices. Okay. So it depends again on that facility's inmate population as far as how well recognized IFA would be, because IFA, even in the free world, is not, I would say, formally organized, right? And especially a lot of the things that we do, they are very much so part of the informal economy when it comes to the ritual work and all of these different things. um, there's no like organized body right now that's recognized by any country whereby you can say a person goes through this passageway in order to become an Ifa priest or priestess. That is not a formalized way that our tradition is recognized. Obviously, it's recognized within lineage and things like that when it comes to practitioners on a day to day level. That is different. The other religions, Christianity especially, Islam, even Buddhism and other practices, do have some form of formally recognized bodies or organizations, wherefore they can provide formal documentation to show that this person has been ordained as a priest or a priestess in this religion in order for them to be able to serve the prison population much better, right? Um, can disciplinary actions limit an inmate's ability to practice IFA? Obviously, yes, right? Discipline can be temporarily restrict access to group services, organized meetings, materials, things like that, right? So again, it comes down to the notion that a person is in prison. When a person is an inmate, they are already limited to access to certain things just by the very nature of the environment that they are in. So I got a few Alafias. Greetings. Nasty Noble 142. You're saying Dennis Finkelton, trying to say the word, the handle properly. Great video. Thank you very much for that. So absolutely. There's going to be some restrictions, right? But that being said, you still maintain your basic rights. Nobody can force you not to practice or not to believe in what you believe in, because a lot of that is internal, right? But it's not like this kind of mentality where somebody's going to say you cannot believe. They shouldn't. Let me rephrase that. They shouldn't come and say that you cannot practice or believe in what you believe in. However, there will be restrictions on your practice because of what we do. And we're going to get right into that now with the ritual tools and the daily practice and how do we navigate these particular aspects of it. So, can practitioners access or possess IFA texts or do materials, religious literature? And I think it's Bruagera, I think that's what your name was. We were talking about, you were talking about that earlier, how that was a difficulty for you. And it would be if you don't have somebody on the outside who can send you those particular materials and things like that, right? You can order them. The inmates can usually order them and get them delivered and things like that, as long as they're not violating any type of contraband policy or procedure or anything like that, right? So the content is usually not restricted. The challenge is for the inmate to be able to get that delivered to them. You probably won't find IFA text and things like that widely spread in prison libraries. Again, it's because of the nature of the practice. Even so, with that, there's not a whole lot of standardized literature, books, and things like that, even on the tradition itself, even for people in the free world. As I said before, it's not like there is an abundance of formal literature that you can even go to and just say, I got these amazing resources on IFA. I'm not saying that they don't exist at all, because there are some there. Are they all great? Unfortunately, not. So that is a challenge in and of itself. Again, for anybody practicing the tradition, even more so for someone who is incarcerated. Okay. Either way, whatever you are receiving, it must follow the guidelines of the system, the institutional procedures for purchasing, receiving, retaining property, things of that nature. Obviously, it cannot, you don't want it to have any type of contraband or anything that could be considered suspicious whenever it's being shipped to you. So, if you get it from a vendor, somebody, a retailer, or what have you, there shouldn't be an issue. But if it's family or friends sending you something, make sure that it doesn't have anything in it that could be considered to be contraband, because you likely won't get it in that case. Okay. Still, even so, for safety, security concerns, the facility can still ban a person from being able to get certain IFA text and things like that. So, again, it's very much so nuanced or what have you. Okay. Oh, okay, Benjamin. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much for joining. Until our just I said hello. So our just isn't joining us today, guys, because he is actively participating in a very blessed initiation experience. Okay, meaning he's overseeing the process is what I'm saying. Greetings, Martine. Thank you so much for joining. So absolutely. What about like the divination tool? So this would be more so applicable for somebody who is a Babalawo or an Ianifa and they want to have their divination tools. Or even so, like certain practitioners do have their own, the Akin, yes, that would be like the hand of Ifa. So, can you have those devices and things like that? No. For the most part, no. I don't know of any situation where that would be applicable, simply because they contain so many different things. You're talking about a king, the sacred, the hand of Ifa, the sacred king, a Pele. You have shells and stones for some of the icon for like the different Orishas or what have you, stones and just natural elements. Even so, blood has been spilled on those things. And you can definitely remove that before shipping or getting it to a person. But even so, just the nature of the way our items are created, they are not going to be acceptable in any prison environment. Now, for somebody to ship that to you, because they're considered contraband. These are things a huge security risk, right? The reality of it is they're a huge security risk. So you will not be able to legally have those things in there. Now, there may be, some situations where people do have them, but they are completely against policy, even if they do. And it's just highly unlikely just because of the nature of these particular devices. Greetings, Cameroon. Wow. Thank you for joining. Cameroon, no, it's not West Africa, Central Africa. Sorry about that. Okay. It's Central, right? Am I right? I know it's not West. I think it's part of Central Africa. You can let me know that. Let's see. Are Ilekis or the sacred ID permitted? And must they be tucked in, removed, or what have you during inspection? So like typically this is not going to be allowed because jewelry in and of itself is typically not allowed in the prison environment. Again, it's considered contraband, and then especially if like these are not. I mean, you can still do something, I guess, because they would be like a choking risk or what have you. But there are some that even have like points to them and things like that. So they're not going to be allowed in the prison environment. It's not just because it's our practice. This is holistically across the prison environment. You're not supposed to have jewelry. Like that's the policy. All right. I know there are exceptions. I know people are gonna come and say, well, this happens at XYZ. Yeah, it might happen, but that doesn't mean that that is the policy. So I am not going to relate any type of content contradictory to what prison policy states, right? How do you properly set up altars? This was a common question I got from a few people. So, nuance, it can happen, right? So you can have a small altar at your desk or your personal area within your cell. Obviously, that space in and of itself is limited, so you're going to have to keep your items limited. And when I say this, I'm talking about more so of an ancestor altar. These devices are kept more so in the diaspora. This is not a part of standard IFA practice, but I wanted to answer this question even so because a lot of people do still keep ancestor altars, especially us in the diaspora, who came through like traditions other than strict Isheshe or what have you. So it is a commonality, and sometimes people just want to keep this either way. So you can do a makeshift type of altar or what have you, ancestor altar. It wouldn't be an Orisha altar, not an authentic Orisha altar. However, it can't contain any contraband. So anything that is considered to be against policy, you definitely want to avoid that. Anything that is altered is not going to be able to go on your altar, right? So you can, if you want to, you can substitute things if it is allowable for you to do so. You can utilize certain like paper-based symbols or representation of things that are allowed within the facility. So you may want to draw some things, or you can use paper in a way that is compliant, right? And make symbols or what have you out of that. That is allowable to keep on an altar, something like that, like an ancestor altar or what have you, okay? Or inmates allowed to keep journals, notebooks, prayer, dream books, Odu notes, things like that. Absolutely, the facility allows for these things as long as it is on regulated, right, materials that are allowed to be within the facility. You can probably get some of those things right there in the commissary, if I'm right about that, aside you if you're there. So I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly, that you could get like notebooks from the commissary. I don't want to misspeak in that particular instance. Let's see, I got a few people joining. Okay, is it Tasmanity TV? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Love your content. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Alafia. Greetings. Welcome. Greetings to all of you all who are joining us on Instagram as well. All right, so now we're going to transition into ritual practice, daily observances. This is where the major complication comes in at, because you cannot have Orisha pots and things like that, right? So what are you allowed to do? What can inmates do from this particular perspective as far as honoring Ifa on a day-to-day basis? So you can still pray out loud or internally. It's probably going to be more ideal to pray internally if you're in an environment or in a space where you don't have full-on privacy, which unfortunately is very common in American-based prison environments. Other systems are completely different, right? You can still recite your Odu verses and things like that, even so in Yoruba. And that's even another thing I forgot to say when I was talking about the books and stuff like that. So you probably won't be able to receive books that are written in the Yoruba language if you speak, read, and write, you're fluent in written Yoruba. You probably won't be able to receive books in that language unless there is somebody at that particular facility who can read it and ensure that it is good, which they probably won't do, right? So you would want to make sure that you're getting things that are in the English language. Even so, Spanish, I'm pretty sure they allow that because it is a well recognized, it's, is it a second language like officially in the U.S.? I'm not sure about this. Some of you all who speak Spanish or know about that, please let me know. Of course, English is the official language, the lingua franca, but I think that Spanish is like an officially recognized spoken language, written language in the U.S., right? So I think that you should be able to get those particular, you can get resources or what have you, definitely in the English language, potentially in the Spanish language, but you definitely want to check with your particular facility to make sure that that's okay, because you don't want to spend money, time, energy, or resources getting things, purchasing, I should say, or having somebody send you things that you won't be able to actually receive. Okay. You, as I said before, you're not going to be able to feed Orishas because you won't have an Orisha pot. It is pointless to go, let me say this, according to Isheshe, it is pointless to go to just leave offerings, anywhere, which like you really don't have the capacity to do that. Because in Isheshe, you're feeding an Orisha pot. In Isheshe practice in Nigeria, and I'm emphasizing this because I do know that some people practice Lukumi and Santeria, and you guys do leave offerings out in nature. I'm not condemning that practice. I'm just stating that this is what is done in the Isheshe tradition in Yoruba land, Nigeria, whereby you are going to utilize pots, icons, and things like that in order to feed the Orishas with. Because of that, you won't be able to do that when incarcerated. Somebody can do it on your behalf, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. So let me take a few questions I have. You're saying, have you heard that you can talk to Ifa through the Mother Earth? No, I have not. Gregor, is that, were you trying to say Gregor? I have not heard about that before, so I'm not familiar with that. Are you allowed to read the Odu Ifa if you are a non-initiate? Absolutely, yes. You can read it. You may not full on get the understanding of it because most Odu Ifas are like based on translations from the Yoruba language, and it's just not always clear. Not the ones that I have seen. Even so, like any Odu Ifa is necessarily incomplete because there's no way that somebody can completely catalog all of the Odu verses and everything because it's knowledge that has been passed down. So even there are different versions of it, even though it's kind of the same thing holistically. Okay, you're saying a word from Mother Earth. I have not. I still have not heard. I get what you're saying, but I've never heard of that particular practice before. Few things in here. Asaju, you are saying yes, they sell writing notebooks and loose leaf paper on it. I figured that, just wanted to make sure I didn't mistake that. So definitely you can still buy journals, notebooks, and things like that. And obviously if they're in the commissary, they are according to policy or standard, so you should be good there. Okay? You're saying writing tablets, not like notebooks per se. I got it. Okay, so the point being, you can buy something where you can actually write on and utensils to you and write with in the commissary. Going back to that before. Alrighty, use J Chandler, you said thank you. I'm Haitian, trying to learn about African spirituality. I wish to do it right. Ashe, Ashe. So you are absolutely welcome. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so another question, can inmates practice ancestor veneration? If so, how? So we kind of got to this before. Yes, you can absolutely practice ancestor veneration, especially, you just said with Haitian, because I practice Haitian voodoo too. So especially with a lot of the traditions, like the diaspora practice of the voodoo and hoodoo and Gula Geechee and all of these types of practices, ancestor veneration, like just communing with your ancestors, right? Reflecting quietly, even so, having like ancestral photos and things like that, paper symbols, things like that that are allowable. You can absolutely utilize those devices and work through ancestor veneration in that way, according to the IFA. Well, again, that's not IFA per se, but you can still venerate your ancestors in those ways, right? Authentic IFA-based shrine-like setups, that's a no-no. Again, like you got a lot of materials there. You would even have to feed that device. Even so, that's another nuance that I didn't even put on here. But that's a whole another caveat in and of itself, like to be able to feed the Orisha pots, whether it's an Egungun shrine or what have you, you would have to have the acceptable sacrifices and offerings, or even the offerings if you're not doing sacrifices, which like you would have to be able to get that on a regular basis, even if you could feed them, which you cannot. You cannot have them there, right? But even if you could, that would present a new challenge in and of itself, is to have the right materials to always feed your icons with, right? Another question was about, can you wear like the white clothing and head coverings and things like that? Any other type of ritual garments that are used in observation? And obviously, the answer is going to be no to that. Prisoners are required to maintain uniformity, which means that they have to wear the standard uniforms that are set forth for you in that facility. That being said, it could potentially be white or another color that is excuse me, white or another color that is standardized at whatever facility that you are at, which would be beautiful, right? Because white is a like it's okay color for everybody to wear. The challenge in this notion with colors in general is if a color is taboo for you, because that could be a reality. You may be at a facility where you have to every single day wear a uniform, a prison uniform. That is something that's taboo for you to wear, and you would have to be able to circumvent that through EBO and other sacrifices and other process, and we'll get to that as well. Okay, head coverings, again, you can't, because it goes against not only the standardization guidelines, but like something like this, you could easily keep contrabanding. So that is even applicable for like women in Muslim women, excuse me, and facilities who are typically required to have to wrap for their traditional practice. And again, the prison policy is always going to trump anything that is on the level of like your individuality, personal practice, or what have you, because of the restrictions that are applied there when it comes to contraband and things like that, right? So what can be substituted for things that you cannot get, like soaps and medicines? I was asked this question. Is a very, very important question. I'm happy it came up. So it is, I'm going to say first that nothing can 100% substitute for something like spiritual soap or something that you need to take internally or to put on your body. However, you can mitigate some of the needs, right? So help you out, balance things out through doing EBO. And there are also other types of ritual work that can be done on your behalf as needed. There's so many different rituals in IFA, and it's going to be based on what you need for your particular circumstance at that time, right? And so you can get that done remotely. You do not have to you do not have to be there in order to get that done. All right. So you're saying, you say LA, then I don't know what you mean by that. Or can you explain more? All right. So if a divination, right? This is a major part of the practice, obviously. So we're going to talk about that, clergy access, external support, etc. Right? So can you receive divination through a babalawo? Ianifa as well. I always say babalawo. While incarcerated, absolutely, you can get this done, right? But again, always nuances and caveats here. There are going to be many restrictions and limitations that apply to somebody being able to come to a prison and give you a divination session in person, right? Of an approved Babalawo Ianifa could be added in theory to the official list of religious volunteers or visitors to that specific faith group or facility. But the likelihood of that happening, well, first, the likelihood of that happening can be difficult because, again, there are not official organizational standards according to Western society for Babalawos or Ianifas, as I talked about earlier, right? So there's no like ordination body or something like that that actually governs this particular process for Babalawos or Ianifas. And I'm on the fence about that, right? I think that there should be some organization for people who are in situations like this and who need it, right? But I'm not really for standardizing our tradition in order to fit within Western, scopes of practice and what they do, right? So like Christianity is highly organized at like the highest, deepest level, especially when you're talking about like the Vatican, the Pope, and things like that, right? And they have these high level of sophisticating bodies and processes and so forth and so on for that religion. So they can get pretty much anywhere they want to get into because of those dynamics. We don't have those. Should we be forced to have those? No, but we live in a world that requires that for situations like this when it comes to people being incarcerated. So, I think we're a community. We're definitely a community-based tradition. So we should be making allowances and, figuring out what we can do on that front. But again, I think the dynamic goes back to, first of all, the tradition itself is so dispersed. We are a small percentage of, religions or spiritual practices in any given space worldwide. And then, on top of that, we're even much smaller within the prison system. Like, it's easy to go to one particular facility and maybe only have one or even no IFA practitioners in that particular space. So that creates a lot of challenges for us trying to work within those dynamics, okay? Another major hurdle with somebody coming to do divination in particular is they won't be able to get the tools and the utensils that they need in there, because even for an outsider, somebody in their free world, it would still be considered contraband to bring in an IFA divination board, right? And all of those different things. So there are so many different challenges related to this dynamic. Alafia, SCC, thank you for joining. Thank you everybody for joining on all platforms wherever you are. So they may have to use approved substitutes, right? Which is likely not going to even work because there aren't really many substitutes there are substitutes for certain things you can do in EFA divination. I'm not saying that is not the case, but even the substitutes will still qualify as contraband. So, you go around in a circle trying to mitigate that particular situation, right? So, you're going to have to get somebody to advocate on your behalf for situations like that. The law can be changed, and, we can protest and we can, try to lobby and things like that. But again, it will have to be enough people to do so in order to be able to help out the any individuals who are incarcerated, right? So there has to be enough interest there. There has to be enough motivation for people to get behind this. Alrighty, so you are asking, thanks for taking the EFA knowledge to the global arena. May you be blessed. I say thank you. Let's see. Do you think a healthy balance could be allotted digital consultation? I don't really understand that question for long SSC. You say I'd be surprised if you could do a proper reading in an institution. You can't, just because the materials aren't there. You can't bring the materials in to get the reading done. That's the biggest challenge with that. Otherwise, you can. This is, where the family and friends are going to come in heavily with somebody who is practicing the tradition, right? So you can contact the Babalawo that's outside of the prison for remote divination services, obviously, unless you know that person and they're on your contact list and they're able to communicate with you. You would have to go through communicate with you directly. You would have to go through like your family and friends and things like that, right? So you can still get a reading. You can still get the results relayed to you. That's going to be in the form of either a phone call, right? A letter, which I would advise, even if the phone call is had, I would still advise that the inmate be sent a letter with the results, because there's something that he or she could maintain, they could keep it and continue to look at and go back and forth and, mitigate that and integrate, I should say, that information, especially when things like warnings or taboos, things like that come up in an EFA reading. They're going to need that information with them on a consistent basis so they can have that information. In some cases, you may be able to email them the information. All of this is still subject to monitoring, right? So that's another nuance there. SSC, you're saying, so for the Babalawo to do divination be a video conference in jail. That is a good idea. I don't know if it will be allowable though, right? But this really good thought. Like I know that the videos, somebody can talk via video to someone else, but I don't know what the regulations are for the person on the other side, right? Aside you, if you're still there, can you provide insight into that? Like, could somebody technically do like a video call reading where the Babalawo is there and presenting the information? I imagine time restrictions would apply to a scenario like that as well, because that could present challenges. I don't think you have like carte blanche to just, have this long hour to hour and a half long conversation if somebody is doing an EFA reading. But if it's possible, I would still encourage it. Again, still any type of reading, I still would encourage the letter to be sent or an email if possible, things like that. Or Babalawo is allowed to visit for religious counseling. So this will be outside just doing the divination session, like them just coming in to counsel and communicate with the individual from a chaplain perspective, right? They could always get on their personal visitors list pending that they meet all the requirements and things like that. But I'm saying this from a perspective of being a chaplain to someone. And the answer is yes. So if the priest passes background checks and all of that kind of stuff, they're recognized by the facility as bona fide clergy. Again, this is going to be the challenge because of the organization of it, the rules that apply for being able to even be accepted as clergy to a facility. All right, they must follow the same rules and guidelines as everyone else, and so they have to show that they are an IFA priest some kind of way. Looks like I just went out. I'm back. You guys can hear and see me, right? I can see myself, so I think I'm good. But you said yes, that will be allowed. It would also be allowed in person if the Babalawo is on the visitation list. Absolutely. So yeah, you can kind of navigate that through the Babalawo being on the visitation list. But that could come with some challenges depending on like the list and how the Babalawo even want to handle that particular situation. So again, there are ways to mitigate some of the challenges, but it's not going to always be easy or straightforward, right? So, you said some have phones to use anytime. Yeah, so that is not allowable. It happens 100%. It happens, but they're not supposed to have phones. I don't think so. Am I wrong? I know at least it used to be the case that you're not supposed to have a phone in the prison system. I know it happens because I get messages sometimes on DMs or what have you from inmates on Instagram asking questions about EFA, but I don't think they're supposed to actually be on Instagram. He said the only feasible answer I see is these questions and situations to have the consultation done through the person's mother, godparent. Well, I would say it would be to have it done through a family and friend, right? So, they might not have a mother that is able to or even willing to go through this process for them. Because you got to remember, we're dealing with a tradition that some of our family and friends don't even accept, right? So you're looking at a situation where somebody's mother may be a Christian and they're like, I'm not dealing with that stuff, right? I don't care what you was practicing. I'm not dealing with it. So that's a whole nother conversation in and of itself. Now, if you do have a godparent or somebody who is, like willing to go through this process and help you out, things like that, that's beautiful. That's absolutely great. But unfortunately, that's not the case for everyone. So, yeah, I would say, try your best to work with family and friends as much as possible whenever allowable. You said that is true about the phones. Yeah, I didn't think that you could just have them unless the rules or guidelines have changed. Um, Let me give you some of the real challenges because they exist, right? There are real challenges for practicing EFA for any of us. Definitely for people who have even more restrictions than someone in the free world. Most staff are very unfamiliar with the tradition. They don't know what it is. They're going to equate it to witchcraft in most instances because of what we do, sacrifices and offerings. You know, globally, as society advances and get back to the ways of their tradition, more and more people are hearing about Ifa, understanding it, even coming back to it. And so they're having a little bit more education and knowledge about it. But even in those cases, we're still way behind when it comes to mainstream acceptance of the tradition. And that goes for every environment, and especially for environments where in prisons where you have chaplains who oversee processes who are usually going to be of the Christian persuasion. Okay. So a lot of times it's going to create confusion, delays, and just people not knowing what you're doing. And so they're automatically going to judge it or put it in a certain category that is not correct, unfortunately. Right. You're going to get mislabeled oftentimes. I said that before. They may even classify it as gang related, just depending on the scenario. So you have to be really, really careful there, right? I've said this before. You can't have your tools. They're essential, the icons, the hand of Ifa, what have you, herbs, the crochet, certain things you need to take, the cola nuts, etc. Those devices are banned. You can't get them easily in the prison system. Can't get them at all. You're not supposed to get them at all. I'm sure somebody can get them, but not according to prison policy, okay? Most prisons do not have Ifa priests, as I said before, any type of organized group, which that creates a challenge in and of itself, because as we were talking about before, in most prison systems, Christians can organize and actually meet and have service, if you will. Same thing with Muslims, but Ifa practitioners are usually relegated to not being able to do any of those things. Even so, ATR as a whole, so it's not even just specific to Ifa, but ATR practices again because they have been deemed witchcraft, though Wicca can be organized and practiced in some facilities, but we're still on the outskirts with this, and we got to do a lot of championing, right? And lobbying and things like that for individuals who are within our community who are incarcerated, as I said before. Babalawos and Ianifas rarely seek to even access prison populations, okay? And that's, another reality, because you have, like, especially prisons throughout the U.S., you're going to have volunteer groups that are usually associated with the Christian dynamic who will go there and provide so many different free services for their population. You won't see that a lot with Babalawos or Ianifas who take up the charge to go and provide that level of service. And that's for so many reasons. I'm not pointing my finger at anyone. I myself, unfortunately, I haven't even thought about that dynamic until I did this episode, and it really got me to thinking, like, wow, I would love to be able to integrate into that in some way. I got to figure out what that looks like, but it's, nuanced. There's a lot of things that go into it, a lot of understanding that goes into it. And most of the time it's not because like a Babalawo or Ianifa shuns someone who is incarcerated, because I'm not in the Ianifa, but what I mean is I work with the Babalawo. So, at this level, we don't do that. However, it's just not part of the tradition or the thought processes, I guess, just because there's so many other nuances and hurdles that we're trying to overcome at the level of somebody who is providing IFA-based services. Okay. We talked about that before. We just don't pass that clergy process. So now I'm going to transition into some Orisha wisdom, talk about some Orishas that help govern the process if somebody is incarcerated. And overall, this is about working with these Orisha either through prayer, right? Ebo, things like that, and different ritual work, okay? That can be very, very helpful. I'm not telling anybody to go out and just do a ritual or have a ritual done to any specific Orisha, because you always want to check to see which Orisha is going to help you out. I'm just cataloging how the different Orishas work within these dynamics and how they can be useful to someone who is incarcerated. So Shango, obviously, excuse me, guys. Shango obviously governs like the judicial dynamic as a whole. He oversees accountability, truth-seeking authority, correction, judgment, all of those things, right? He is considered the great judge, if you will. So he helps us, with sharp decision making, with counteracting unfairness and ensuring that judgment upholds integrity and things like that. So he can be very beneficial to somebody who may be incarcerated and got a raw deal, like they literally didn't commit it. I'm not talking about somebody who's just saying it, but somebody who did not do the crime, or they were unfairly accused at some level of that situation. Shango can be greatly helpful with appeals and cases of wrongful treatment, injustices, and things like that. He's oftentimes fed. I don't want to use the word petition, because petition a lot of times come from the diaspora, where people just go directly to the Orisha, and that's not how we practice any Sheshe. Just because Shango oversees this area, he's not necessarily going to help you in this area, but he can, and it would be great to feed him in a lot of instances. He might even just come up naturally. Obatala is also very important in justice. I actually put out a post today about Obatala's connection to the justice system, because a lot of people don't really think about Obatala in this way. And I've said this before, with people who are not, who like maybe Obatala is your head Orisha, are really closely connected. You're really closely connected to Obatala's energy. What I find a lot, when people are out of alignment, they tend to have dealings with the criminal justice system. Children of Obatala, I mean, are people who are really closely connected to his energy when they're not properly aligned, right? And so, because he governs, morality at a very high level, he also has a strong hand in matters of justice. So you want to get, back in alignment with Obatala at a high level, because he helps with restraint, balance, responsible decision making. Obatala is all about that particular energy. Okay, he helps you to slow down, right? Not overreact, not act impulsively, reactionary behavior, things like that. He helps a person to calm down and chill, right, on a personal level. He can also be very helpful in guarding serenity and just tranquility and peace and calmness around you holistically. So especially if you're in an incarcerated type of environment, Obatala can be fed a lot of times to help level out that balance and that energy around a person, so that way they don't get into a whole lot of conflict. People come to them peacefully, and they don't really mess with that person when they are properly aligned with Obatala's energy. You said, what's Oshun's favorite thing to eat? So I am not discussing Oshun or like just Orishas in general. Even so, like a lot of that is myth and folklore, where you come up with, her favorite things to eat. She has certain items that are absolutely acceptable to her. We did cover that in our Oshun mythology course, so you can find that on the website, and we outline everything that she accepts as part of her offerings. But a lot of that, favorite things to eat type of terminology has to do with folklore more than anything else. Ogun governs endurance. So Ogun will be very important, hugely important to somebody incarcerated, because Ogun is, the god of war. So he is going to help you endure. He's going to help you go through hardships and trying times. He's going to help you to maintain discipline, all right, and diplomacy, which is very important. High level of protection. Ogun will go to battle for you. Definitely keep, people from messing with you and things like that. Gives you the strength, even so, that you need internally to keep going in battle. And this is for any situation. Obviously, I'm focusing on the topic or the subject matter at hand, but these are what I'm listing here. These are the general attributes of the Orishas, and they can help you in so many different ways. So he's going to support, Ogun is going to support that survival instinct. strengthen you to keep going and pushing forward, right? Gives you the ability to function within, like a harsh environment, restrictive system. Even so, when we're talking about balance, like I said before, if you're not aligned with Ogun and he's your head Orisha or a closely connected Orisha to you, you probably find yourself a lot of times in arguments or very, very aggressive, heated situations that could absolutely lead to jail time, being incarcerated, things like that, because you can be very, very aggressive. All right. And so you definitely want to be in alignment with Ogun's energy, especially if you are a child of Ogun, to prevent those things in the first place, but also to have his protection for when situations come at you, because you're probably going to be more prone to getting in battle like situations because of your own natural disposition, but also the way your energy will come off on other people, right? So Ogun will help to defend you in conflict, right? He's going to disrupt the plans of people who are trying to cause you problems. He'll fight against you and, fight against the people who are working against you and protect you in those particular situations. He's going to help you win battles, especially, situations where you can avoid. And that is the reality sometimes in prison environments where you might have to fight. Even when you're not trying to, you're trying to avoid it, things happen. SU is very, very important within these dynamics as well. SU is going to govern access, communication, huge in an incarcerated type of environment for you to be able to connect with the right people, the right opportunities and sources of things that you need. He's going to mitigate a lot of the obstacles that are blocking your path because he opens up those gateways. He opens the doorways for you to be able to have the opportunities that you need. So he will be helpful to a lot when it comes to things connected to like the probate process and so forth. Did I say that right? Is it the probate? So what's the process called? I'm trying to think of when you go and you are, going against the council to see if you can get on probation. That's right? Not probational. Like you're appealing to see if you can be released. If somebody knows that outside you, if you're there, you know that what I'm trying to say, if you could tell me what that is. I think it's the probate process. So SU can help you even with your communication, because that's important for you to be able to say things, talk to people the right way when you're in these type of situations, because tensions can happen, things can get heated very, very quickly in these types of environments. So it can help you mitigate that, to think strategically before you act on certain things. Recognize, to make the right decisions. I'll say it that way. Okay. You said which Orisha will be connected to the appeals process? Shango more so than any other Orisha. Okay. But I was saying, what's the process called? Is it just the appeals process? I don't know. I feel like the board that you go and appeal to. What's that process called? Okay, so sorry, going back to what I was saying, guys. SU sharpens your awareness, your judgment, even so in different situations, and that's for all of us, right? He helps you to see options where you may not normally be able to see one. Just helps you to think logically. He's very important in that dynamic, and your ability to think your way out of situations when you're in an incarcerated environment is very, very critical. SU is going to open up those pathways as well, opportunities. It can show you favor when you're going through the appeals process and things like that. It can disrupt plans of people who are working against you as well, similar to Ogun, because SU is a guard spirit, right? So he's going to help to protect as well, but he's more so on, keeping you safe. Ogun more so will go on the offensive and deal with people on your behalf, even if you don't know that they're working against you, right? And he can issue that is can help to remove some restrictions, even so Ogun, because they both are path clearers in that regard. Let's see. Parole board. That's what I was saying. I kept saying probate. Parole. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Absolutely. So I was referring to the parole board. When you are going up against the parole board, you're trying to appeal or anything, it is great to do offerings to these Orishas. Not to say that you're gonna just get off, right, wholeheartedly, but it can be lessen your sentence, or different things can happen to be favorable for you. It's not a get out of jail free card. I do want to say that, because that's not what the tradition is about anyway. Everything that we do in the tradition is about destiny alignment, but you can get some energetic balancing so that maybe your sentence can be reduced, or you can just have favorable situations, maybe like work release programs, or it's not always like they release. Well, yeah, it is work release. That's what I was thinking of. So it could be like a work release type of situation where they allow you to, get some free time and things like that, pending you do not abuse those types of privileges and things of that nature. Okay. Thank you, guys. You're very welcome. And I'm talking to the people on Instagram. Thank you all for joining us, everybody who is joining us on either platform that you're on. So Iyami. Iyami is very important within this dynamic as well. Iyami, they govern correction, boundaries, justice through consequences, even so through us, right? And they enforce universal balance. They are going to influence our daily life by encouraging people to respect certain limits and boundaries, to honor their responsibilities towards us. And it's very important to somebody who is incarcerated, right? To learn, also to help you to learn from your own actions, which is important too. They will enforce consequences for people who violate you in any regard. So whether it's violation through a fellow inmate, or a violation through the justice system, or what have you. All right. They'll stop people who try to harm you without just cause, because the Yami are all about, terrestrial justice right here in this earth. Right. And they'll help out with forces that are, people have hidden motives against you. They'll remove all of that and remove those threats against you. So it's very important for us to, connect with our divine forces in this particular manner. All right. Let's see. One more reach I want to go through is Oya. So Oya governs change, transitions, disruptions, right? Breakthroughs, clearing paths, moving quickly brings those storms and things like that. So she can help you release old patterns that are keeping you stuck and tied to such an environment, okay? Especially when it comes to things like recidivism. She can help you to adapt quickly to your environment, especially when you're going into the system and things like that, because it's going to require adjustments on your part. And also move through major internal changes, right? Strengthen you through that so you can stay strong. Excuse me. Oya can also break stagnation. She can clear obstacles as well with her whirlwind of change. Just quickly, things just move and happen on your behalf, things you weren't even expecting sometimes. She can force quick, unexpected shifts when transformation is needed. All right. So you want to continuously connect with the Orishas through prayer, through intentionality, guys, discipline. So you're going to honor their attributes, all those things that I just said for these Orishas and all of the Orishas. That means you're still going to be walking in Iwa Pele. The Orishas are not here to just come get you out so that you can go back to living that same life. It's all about destiny alignment. They can absolutely help you in so many ways through the elbow, the sacrifices, and other devices that are available to us through the tradition, but it's still contingent on us walking in integrity. It's not something to come to just because you think you're going to get some benefits out of it, and then once you get what you want, you just go your way and go back into the same situation that you were dealing with. Because that happens is you're actually going to experience worse problems than you did initially. Okay, so that is a hugely important dynamic. All right, so let's see. You're asking, are there specific meditations for each Orisha? So by meditations, there are definitely incantations that, songs of praise and things like that that you can say to the Orishas. Absolutely. And you can definitely use them in the form of meditation. I hope that's what the question is about. Odu wisdom. So I'm going to give you guys a few Odus that can speak to a person that's dealing with a situation of incarceration, to give you education, wisdom, and understanding when it comes to these dynamics. And, if you have access to them, or if you have family and friends who are incarcerated, you can maybe send them some verses and some, deeper level guidance when it comes to these particular dynamics. So Oyiku Meji, this speaks to restrictions, right? This is a form of transformation when you're going through rebirth and things like that. So it speaks to anybody who is dealing with restrictions, limitations, confinement. Obviously, incarceration is a huge part of that dynamic, but it's in any regard, right? Anytime you're going through something that is going to limit you in any way, this particular Odu speaks to that dynamic, right? And the need for you to face your choices, head on past choices, and then obviously make better future choices. It teaches you that limits and isolations are time for you to reflect, time for you to restrain yourself. Go within. It's very heavily on internal alignment and just kind of taking that retreat and drawing back and figuring out what's going on with you. Okay. It absolutely warns against repeating harmful patterns as well, right? It pushes a person to stop actions that just cause more problems in the future. That's why internal reflection is so huge in this particular Odu, because this Odu is all about deep level rebirth, transformation, metamorphosis, even. Okay. It also indicates that transformation begins within. Whenever external options are limited, you got to start here. And it can absolutely, I should say here, right? In mind, I'm pointing to my heart, but it's really here. Worry, right? You got to start making better decisions here. Ogunda Meji. So I had to bring through this particular energy. So Ogunda Meji holistically is about whenever you're going through trials and obstacles and challenges and things like that. And it speaks to the notion of pushing through and enduring whatever you're going through. And this is hugely important for somebody who is in a restrictive space like incarceration, because obviously it can be difficult and very, very challenging for somebody to endure certain hardships that they have to go through in such an environment. Helps you with strategic thinking. It's all about strategy, right? Talking about Ogun type of force, which is warfare, right? So warfare is all about strategy, not just going out to just battling physical battle or what have you. It incorporates diplomacy. It incorporates our ability to be able to strategize against the enemy, right? And in this case, I'm not even saying the enemy is external. A lot of times the enemy is also internal. So you got to deal with both the internal and external enemy. Being able to control yourself, right? Stay alert, avoiding unnecessary problems or conflicts. And that goes with you when you're in the environment, and also when you're outside of the environment. Environment being incarceration. Okay. This do also warns us that impulsive reactions lead to so many problems because outgoing energy can be impulsive when out of alignment. It just goes head first and just keeps on moving, not thinking. And that's not the energy that you want. You want balance, right? So you don't want to be on either end of the spectrum. You don't want to be complacent either and just sitting back, because you will also have to advocate for yourself in many instances in this type of environment. Okay, especially in this type of environment, we have to do this on a day-to-day level. But especially when you're going through certain hardships, you're going to have to mitigate those challenges, and you're going to have to stand up for you in those situations. This also reveals that endurance, discipline are essential for getting through those long, difficult periods. Okay, guys, so I'm going to close up after this section, walking with Ifa. If you have any further questions, comments, or concerns on either platform, please let me know. Go ahead and type them in, and we'll get to them before we close out. Okay? So remember, guys, practicing Ifa in prison begins with understanding your rights. That's why I went through a lot of that in the first place, because you do have rights, though you do have limitations as well. It's not the same as in the free world. You have to know what is permitted, and you have to honor your path with discipline and intentionality, okay? You can study, an incarcerated individual, I should say, can absolutely study the Odu through those books and things like that, resources that we mentioned, so forth and so on. And to gain guidance, inspiration, direction, etc., without, the ritual tools. There are ways to do this. Point being, you have to be innovative in many cases, which a lot of inmates are very much so. They find ways to get things done, right? They have a whole lot of ingenuity in those situations, and anybody would. You're going to have another level of abilities when you are stressed or limited or restricted, okay? You still should be documenting your dreams, your thoughts, your experiences in a journal, so that your family can share them, with your Babalawo, get interpretation and guidance, because dreams are so very paramount in the tradition. So make sure that you are documenting those things and sharing those, so that you can get the guidance that you need, because your spirits are still communicating with you regardless. A lot of times they're communicating with you even so at a higher level, or at least you can probably hear from them at a higher level when you have more free time to rest your mind and meditate and focus on what's going on in your environment. Families are very critical for working with somebody who is incarcerated, helping you with a priest, helping you to schedule remote divination sessions, helping you with elbow and ritual work, and even so feeding shrines on your behalf, because your family members can do this as well. So please, guys, make sure that you are there supporting your family members when appropriate, right? There's situations where it may not be appropriate, okay? Make sure that you are advocating for the religious accommodations of your family members who are incarcerated through the chaplains, through the administrative system, as much as you possibly can. Remember, guys, the transformation comes from applying the wisdom of Ifa in daily life. It's not just about having this knowledge, but applying it so that we can avoid certain situations. Even so, we can definitely reshape our own behavior and travel the right path for our destiny, or destiny alignment. So you're asking if I can speak on Otu or Meji. Not right now. I do have many resources. I have a long post on my blog, so I encourage you to check that out, because I don't want to go into any other subject matter that I haven't planned for today. You're very, very welcome. Guys, if you're seeking, deeper level transformation, you want to know more about the tradition, definitely check us out. www.asanee44.com. I don't even know why I said www beforehand, but either way, Check us out on the Asanee 44 website, guys. I'm going to get to the next live. Ashe, Newark. Let's see. The next live screen, I plan on doing it on 12/15, so December 15th. Closing out, that'll be our last live stream this year. Well, this Gregorian year. And I'm not going to get started on that. I'm going to talk about appeasing Egbe Orun. So I will be sending out questions and things like that related to Egbe Orun. And I will tell you guys now, and I'm going to reiterate this, I'm not going to go into specific Egbe Orun groups. We do talk about that in a lot more depth in our course online, or if you get like a reading through us and you get your Egbe Orun group or something like that, we definitely give you more explanation into what's going on with them. But I do not cover specific Egbe Orun groups in that capacity. But I am more than willing to try to answer like questions about Egbe Orun in general and working with them. Okay? So with that being said, I am going to go ahead and close up here. Thank you all for joining. Ashe. Have a very blessed and beautiful day and beyond, guys.